It's hard to remember now, but there was a time when Tokyo Ghoul was the fastest growing new series on Earth. Over its 30-volume run, the manga sold nearly 50 million copies, and in the 2010s, you couldn't walk by any hot topic in America without seeing Ken Kaneki's face forced to smile down at you through a leather mask. For a time, this was the it manga and anime of the moment, but that moment has long since passed. Despite selling millions of copies, and still to this day ranking as the 6th most read manga on my anime list, no one really talks about this series anymore. Scratch that. No one really talks about this series anymore, other than to occasionally bemoan its lackluster anime adaptation. If I hear about Tokyo Ghoul at all these days, it's from an increasingly small group of fans crying out for a Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood-style adaptation. A new version of the anime that follows the manga more closely, and if we are being honest with ourselves, also looks better than the Studio Pierrot version. Would I personally like a Tokyo Ghoul Brotherhood? Sure. Time has not been kind to Tokyo Ghoul, and it's hard to watch other contemporary dark fantasy titles get big budget adaptations when this manga couldn't even get all of its major plot points adapted. But a faithful adaptation wouldn't solve all of Tokyo Ghoul's problems. As someone who read this series weekly for years, I have to admit it didn't exactly wrap up neatly. Some major plot points were left unaddressed, some conflicts ended too quickly, others happened off-page, and overall, the manga just seemed to run out of steam. But don't take my word for it, listen to the authors. Sui Ishida, Tokyo Ghoul's creator, wrote a pretty lengthy afterword for the series, explaining some of the difficulties he had as a first-time manga artist managing a weekly title. In the letter, Ishida talks about losing a lot of himself to Tokyo Ghoul. He developed health problems, took on an enormous amount of stress, and even, in a cruel bit of irony, lost his sense of taste.
Everything tasted the same. The symptoms may be different, but I felt like a ghoul. I was shocked to learn how closely the mind is tied to our bodies.
To hear Ishida tell it, the 7 years Tokyo Ghoul was in serialization were far from kind to him. But his letter ends on a bit of a positive note.
The last 6 months of creating Tokyo Ghoul was truly a joy. There was so much to discover and appreciate. Why am I writing and drawing manga? I think it's because that's what I needed. It's a clumsy manga, but I like it.
I feel similarly to Ishida. Tokyo Ghoul isn't some perfect manga. It is clumsy, but I still like it. And I haven't forgotten about it all these years later. After finishing my third journey through this story, I think I finally know why that is. What exactly it was Ishida managed, despite many hardships, to do better than almost any other manga out there. And it's probably not what you expect. An enduring staple of the battle shonen genre is the side character. They're not the main character's closest friends, or even the main character's greatest enemy. While the heroes at the center of the story fight the big bad, these guys are like over here, on the sidelines. The story might focus on this kind of character for a chapter or two, but that's probably all they are going to get. They're like a firework. They leave a big, flashy impression, and then fizzle out of the story. You might get some after images, maybe 1 or 2 extra sparks, but that's it. Once they've had their moment, their chance to fight or compete or teach a special move, that's kind of it for them. Think about Naruto's fellow ninja, Deku's less powerful classmates, or Luffy's pirate rivals in the worst generation. 1 or 2 from each of these groups might stick around, but most will show up for an arc, round out the cast for a while, and then exit stage left. You wouldn't remember them at all if it wasn't for the fact that the author made them eccentric enough to stand out in their handful of scenes. Tokyo Ghoul is undoubtedly Ken Kaneki's story, but it's also full of characters like this. One-off weirdos who end up sticking around throughout the entire manga. And I believe these side characters leave a greater than average impact compared to your typical shonen extended cast. Which really stings when I think about how most of their stories and big moments were underemphasized or cut entirely by the Tokyo Ghoul anime. Now, what exactly is it that sets this cast apart? Two things. One, despite being self-identified as a tragedy, very few characters in Tokyo Ghoul die and stay dead. I've seen this used as a criticism of the manga in the past, and it does at times feel like Ishida is pulling his punches with all the different fake-out deaths. However, by having nearly every member of the extended cast stubbornly survive each arc, the story gets to continuously re-examine and revise our understanding of these characters. And along the way, that understanding often grows and deepens. I think Tokyo Ghoul would be a very different manga if Villain of the Week Tsukiyama failed to survive his first encounter with the pointy end of Toka's Kagune. This character ended up bringing so much personality and flair to the series, and it's impossible to imagine the manga ending his story here. Speaking of Kagune, that brings me to my second point. We need to talk a little bit about Tokyo Ghoul's battle system. Almost every character in this story is a ghoul or a ghoul investigator. Ghouls fight using a Kagune, which comes in one of 4 types and can evolve and change based on a character's intelligence and imagination. Or, put another way, Ishida created a manga that directly ties individuality to strength. These blood tentacles manifest themselves in all sorts of weird and wacky ways. This one shoots electricity. This one makes traps. One of the main antagonists of the series has one that talks. A character's Kagune can also evolve and change through practice, life experience, and cannibalism. That last one's a little weird, but this is a horror manga after all. What this means is most ghoul characters fight using a manifestation of their personality brought forth in physical form. A ghoul masquerading as a priest forms a Kagune resembling papier-mâché crosses, which is symbolically fitting for a character using his religious position as a theatric cover story. The orphan Hinami has a Kagune that shares traits from both of her parents. Its form seems to both protect and comfort her. And ghoul investigator turned ghoul Seido Takizawa wraps himself in a suit of armor. And sure, that's maybe because he doesn't like getting hurt, but it also might be because, deep down, he can't help but see himself as a hero, despite the fact that he doesn't always act like one, to put it very mildly. These aren't the biggest players in this story in the grand scheme of things, but they are each memorable, due in part to this battle system. Kagune as a concept is just metal as hell. Oh, and their designs are often incredible. One of Ishida's main artistic strengths is somehow managing to capture a feeling of uncontrollable power within the confines of a few panels or pages. His current series, Chojin X, takes this one step further by allowing its characters to just do magic. It doesn't call it that, but the supernatural powers present in this manga do away with any sense of reality whatsoever, and the outcome is stunning. It's definitely worth checking out, and if people are interested, maybe I'll do a video on Chojin X in the future. Now back to Tokyo Ghoul. Let's talk about that other side of the human-ghoul war. Ghoul investigators, otherwise known as doves, don't always seem as memorable at first glance compared to the ghoul characters we've been talking about. These investigator characters all dress mostly the same, and they are all themed around real-world detectives. Only their prey are way stronger than your standard serial killer. To keep up with their biologically superior enemy, doves use Quinque, weapons made by harvesting a defeated ghoul's Kagune. Essentially, they rip out these predatory tentacles, shove them in a suitcase, and then use them as fancy weapons. So while the doves may seem straight-laced and bland on the surface, their weapons tell a flashier story on their own. One of human desperation and ingenuity twisted into subjugation and brutality. Doves fight ghouls using weapons harvested from ghouls themselves. They fight man-eating monsters by cannibalizing them, a gruesome act that horrifies the ghoul characters throughout the story. Imagine if someone tried to kill you by shooting you with a gun built from your sister's heart. That's pretty much happening in this manga on a weekly basis. Essentially, the doves transform themselves into the very thing they are trying to destroy: monsters. Now, doesn't that just sound familiar? Yes, it's true. The themes of evolution and metamorphosis found in Kaneki's story play out nearly every time two B-listers in this manga cross paths. It's on brand, poetic, and dare I say, Kafka-esque. With some clever world building and a tendency to not let go of characters, Ishida created a manga that is almost infinitely rereadable. And because his art style really favors grand entrances, exits, and standoffs, these fights between small fry even get time to shine in the manga's actual artwork. Every time I revisit Tokyo Ghoul, I can pick out a new, small story to follow in the margins of this manga's greater narrative. And yeah, picking favorites out of a big expansive cast is just a really fun process. It's probably why every battle shonen introduces a class, or council, or secret society of oddballs. It's appealing in a trading card, popularity poll sort of way, and so many manga and anime do this. It's a lot easier to catch fish with a wider net. Or put another way, if you're a Japanese teen watching or reading Demon Slayer, but you don't really like Tanjiro, maybe you will like older, broodier Tanjiro. Or maybe Tanjiro with a snake, or Tanjiro who's a girl with a big personality. I really do think Tokyo Ghoul pulls off this trick better than most. I have my favorites who jump out at me every time, but with each journey through this series, that list, and my fondness for this manga in general, only grows. This is a manga worth remembering, even if it never gets the Brotherhood-style adaptation fans are clamoring for. It is clumsy, but I still like it. And that's not gonna change anytime soon.
Do you see him? Do you think a depressed person could make this?
Hey, it's Sam again. I just wanted to give a little update on my channel. I know I haven't uploaded a video in quite a while, and there's no one reason for that. Life just sort of got in the way over the last few months. Part of the reason I reread Tokyo Ghoul in the first place was because I was too sick to do much of anything else for a couple of weeks, and that also derailed any channel work. But I am back, feeling healthy, and ready to make many more videos this year. So if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel. We're getting a lot closer to 10,000 subscribers than I ever thought possible, and I can't thank you enough for that. Oh yeah, and if you want to hear my opinions on manga, anime, and all sorts of other topics, I launched a new podcast at the start of this year with my good friend Mallory. You can find it over on the Nobody Leaves podcast YouTube channel, where we've already covered some subjects fans of tracking shots will probably enjoy. A link to that channel will be in this video's description. New episodes of the podcast come out every Friday, so check it out if you get a chance. It's a good time. Anyway, thanks as always for watching. We'll talk again soon.